The day they sealed my cabin gate was the day they sealed their own fate. At 6 a.m., Delilah Peton directed workers to pour concrete completely around my gate posts, blocking all access to my property. $500 daily fines if I tried to break through their security barriers. She stood there smirking, thinking she'd finally won this HOA power struggle. What Delilah didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that they just trapped themselves. See, their fancy HOA development only has one road connecting to the highway. Every inch of that road runs through my private land. While they were sealing my gate, they were actually cutting off their own escape route. 47 families, one way out, and I own every foot of it. 3 months later, she'd be begging me not to leave them stranded forever. But right now, she thinks she's untouchable. What would you do if someone sealed your driveway? This gets insane. My name is Marcus Brennan, and 6 months ago, I thought losing my wife was the worst thing that could happen to me. Then I met my new neighbor. I inherited 40 acres of Montana wilderness from my grandfather, including a rustic cabin and one detail that would become crucial, a private gravel road connecting my land to Highway 12. The sound of tires crunching over that gravel had been the soundtrack of my childhood summers. In 2019, developers built Pine View Estates around my property. 47 McMansions marketed as luxury mountain living with convenient highway access. Those sales brochures promised easy commutes, but forgot to mention that convenient access meant using my private road without permission. The original developers had some handshake deal with grandfather about being neighborly, but handshakes aren't legal documents. And when they sold out, the new HOA just assumed they owned everything. For 4 years, nobody questioned it. Then Delilah Peton bought the biggest house in the development and immediately started her reign of terror. At 49, Delilah embodied everything I hated about suburban power trips. Designer yoga pants that cost more than my monthly groceries. A white BMW she parked diagonally across 2 spaces. And that condescending smile she flashed while explaining how the world should work according to her vision. She became HOA president within 6 months, promising to elevate community standards and protect property values from declining influences. The cabin workshop smelled like cedar shavings and motor oil, scents that reminded me of grandfather's hands teaching me to build things that lasted. After Sarah died from lung cancer 2 years ago, those weekend retreats kept me functional. I'd arrive Friday evening, spend Saturday morning with my tools, then sit on the porch listening to water tumble over creek stones. That peace lasted exactly 14 days after Delilah's coronation. She appeared in my driveway with a clipboard and that shark smile, declaring my iron gate aesthetically incompatible with community vision. The gate had protected our property since 1987, but apparently it offended her refined sensibilities. "We need cohesive design elements," she announced, tapping manicured nails against her clipboard. "Something more upscale. The HOA has pre-approved contractors for appropriate fencing upgrades." I politely explained that my gate sat on private property, not HOA jurisdiction. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes went dead cold. "Oh, sweetie, geography creates mutual responsibilities. We'll work this out." 2 weeks later, a county inspector showed up investigating illegal structures and environmental violations. Someone had filed a complaint. The inspector found nothing. Grandfather built everything to code, but the harassment message was crystal clear. At the next HOA meeting, the rumor mill was already spinning. Delilah had whispered that I was difficult and potentially unstable due to military trauma. She suggested my gate created security vulnerabilities and hinted that veterans sometimes struggle with authority. The smell of cheap coffee and nervous sweat filled the community center as newer residents avoided eye contact. They bought into her narrative about the crazy hermit threatening their property values. But 20 years as an Army Corps engineer had taught me about petty tyrants. They mistake volume for authority and assume everyone else lacks backbone. Delilah was textbook, all bluster, no substance. The real escalation came on a September evening thick with the sound of cicadas. Delilah knocked on my cabin door, clipboard in hand, demanding I attend mandatory community meetings to discuss my compliance obligations. I explained slowly, like talking to a child, that I wasn't an HOA member and my property wasn't subject to their fantasies. She actually laughed. Geographic proximity creates legal obligations. Marcus, your little hermit act ends now. When I refused, she filed another county complaint claiming my road access violated existing easement agreements. Pure fiction, but harassment disguised as bureaucracy. That night, surrounded by the scent of pine needles and Sarah's favorite lavender candles still flickering on the mantel, I opened grandfather's surveyor case. Brass instruments gleamed in lamplight alongside yellowed property deeds and legal documents. If this suburban dictator wanted war, she just picked the wrong engineer. Time to show her what 20 years of military legal training could accomplish. Delilah's declaration of war came with a clipboard and an army of Boer housewives. She'd organized something called the Community Beautification Committee. Her personal squad of yoga pants enforcers armed with measuring tapes and Pinterest dreams. Within a week, they were conducting voluntary property assessments throughout the development, documenting anything that didn't match their vision of mountain luxury perfection. My gate topped their hit list. The formal letter arrived on expensive letterhead, featuring some pretentious mountain silhouette logo. Mandatory appearance required screamed across the top in bold red letters. According to the committee, I was guilty of unauthorized rustic styling, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony, and my personal favorite, geographic noncompliance with community vision. The smell of fresh ink and legal intimidation wafted from the paper as I read their demands. Show up to their meeting or face escalated enforcement action. I didn't show up. Delilah's response was swift and vicious. She declared my gate a public nuisance and filed another county complaint, this time claiming my road access violated mysterious easement agreements that supposedly existed somewhere in the development's legal paperwork. That's when I stopped playing defense. 3 nights later, I sat in grandfather's workshop surrounded by the musty smell of old leather and yellow documents. His surveyor case contained 40 years of property records, and what I found made my pulse quicken like Christmas morning. The original 1987 land deeds told a story Delilah had never bothered to research. My family had never granted any easement to anyone. The gravel road cutting through my property was entirely private, built, maintained, and owned by 3 generations of Brennans. Every car that had used it for 4 years was technically trespassing. My old Army buddy, Jake Morrison, specialized in property rights. Law back in Helena. When I faxed him copies of the deeds, his call back came within an hour. Marcus, this is bulletproof. They have 0 legal right to use your road. You could block access tomorrow, and they couldn't do squat about it. But I learned something about strategy during 20 years of military service. Sometimes the smartest move is letting your enemy think they're winning while you prepare the perfect counterstrike. I decided to offer Delilah a reasonable solution first. Partly because I'm not naturally vindictive, but mostly because I wanted documentation proving I tried to resolve this diplomatically. My proposal was generous beyond what they deserved. A formal easement agreement for $1 per year, plus a mutual respect clause requiring HOA consultation before any changes affecting my property. It would legalize their road usage and end the conflict. The informal meeting happened at the community center, that sterile room that always smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I laid out copies of the original deeds alongside my proposed solution, explaining how this arrangement would protect everyone's interests. Delilah's reaction exceeded my worst expectations. She scoffed at my extortion attempt and accused me of manufacturing a fake crisis to justify greed. According to her warped logic, 4 years of using the road had somehow created established community rights that magically overrode actual property law. She convinced herself that possession equaled ownership like a legal 5-year-old. You can't hold an entire neighborhood hostage over technicalities, she declared, her voice dripping with righteous indignation. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, but Delilah's personality dominated the room like toxic smoke. She rallied them against their hostile neighbor who was supposedly threatening community welfare with legal facts. That meeting ended with Delilah promising to escalate through appropriate channels and deliver consequences for obstructing community progress. I discovered what those consequences looked like 2 days later. Surveillance cameras, motion-activated security cameras, now pointed directly at my property, documenting my every movement like I was public enemy number one. Delilah had also begun photographing my truck, my gate, even my garbage cans on collection day. The constant click and whir of camera mechanisms became the new soundtrack of my weekend retreats. But here's where Delilah's paranoia became my golden opportunity. While researching her camera installation permits, I stumbled across something fascinating about Ms. Peton's real estate business. During my Army years, I'd helped investigate housing fraud cases, so I recognized the pattern immediately. She'd been selling Pine View Estates properties to buyers with promises of guaranteed highway access via well-maintained community roads. Her marketing materials specifically highlighted convenient transportation infrastructure to justify premium pricing. 3 houses sold in the past year alone, all with inflated prices based on road access she legally couldn't promise. Back when I'd worked with military legal teams, we'd seen agents lose their licenses for exactly this kind of material misrepresentation. The irony was beautiful. While Delilah documented my every breath, she'd been committing actual fraud. I started my own documentation project that night. Trail cameras capturing every vehicle from her development using my private road. License plates, timestamps, frequency counts. Every school, bus route, and pizza delivery became evidence of organized trespassing. The familiar crunch of gravel under tires now sounded like future lawsuit settlements. Delilah's next move proved that desperation makes people stupid, but stupidity with money makes them dangerous. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick as a small phone book and smelling like expensive legal intimidation. The HOA board had voted to hire Crawford Mitchell and Associates, downtown's most expensive law firm, to handle their property access dispute. Their retainer alone probably cost more than most families' vacation budgets. The threat letter was a masterpiece of legal theater. 40 pages of fancy letterhead, essentially boiling down to surrender your property rights or we'll sue you into poverty. They claimed my road usage materially interfered with community development and demanded I grant permanent public access or face eminent domain proceedings. Pure bluff, but it told me everything about Delilah's mindset. She'd convinced the board to gamble their entire operating budget on her personal war against reality. While she burned through legal fees, I spent my evenings doing something more productive, hunting through public records like a bloodhound, tracking fresh scent. Back during my Army days, I'd worked with JAG officers investigating housing fraud near military bases. The pattern was always the same. Agents promising amenities they couldn't deliver, inflating prices with fictional features, then vanishing when buyers discovered the truth. Delilah's sales record fit that template like a custom suit. 3 properties sold in 18 months, all marketed with her signature promise. Premium highway access via established community transportation corridor. Her listing photos literally featured my private road captioned as community infrastructure. She'd been selling my property as an HOA amenity without my permission, knowledge, or any legal right to do so. But here's where my research struck gold that would make a prospector weep with joy. One buyer had already filed a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission about misrepresented access rights and fraudulent marketing materials. Apparently, when their moving truck got stuck on the narrow road sections, they'd started asking awkward questions about maintenance responsibilities and legal easements. Questions Delilah couldn't answer because the easements didn't exist. The complaint was public record, buried in state bureaucracy, but accessible to anyone who knew the right filing systems. And 20 years of military paperwork had taught me exactly where to dig. I filed my own detailed complaint that same afternoon, documenting how Delilah had systematically misrepresented property features to inflate sales prices. The State Real Estate Commission takes fraud seriously. Agents lose their licenses permanently for selling amenities they don't control especially when buyers pay premium prices based on false promises. The irony was delicious. While Delilah hired lawyers to threaten me, she was already under investigation for actual crimes.